Hey guys, the judicial branch was another area. I don't recall there being a lot of concern, so this should be pretty quick. The constitutional basis for the judicial branch is found in Article 3. Article 3 creates the Supreme Court, and then it says that Congress should create any of the lower courts beyond that. So that includes the federal district and the appellate courts. Remember, the judges have a lifetime appointment. They are appointed by the president and must be confirmed by the Senate, but then they serve for life. So that's every one of the 800 judges from the district level all the way on up to the Supreme Court. And that's critical for them having independence to make decisions that are constitutionally correct. They don't have to get reelected by the people. They will outlast the presidents who appoint them, so they can basically do what they think is best. The Constitution also says that their salary won't be changed during that time, so another protection built in to allow the courts to do what they think is best. And that was the intent of the branch, talked about in Federal 78 by Hamilton. He argued that the courts would be the weakest of the three branches. He said that the courts, because of their job description, would be the smallest threat to individual liberty. They can't do anything to take away rights, they can only protect them. And so the courts, in that role as safeguard of the people's liberties, have to be independent from the other two branches. Their biggest way to do that is to protect rights is with judicial review. So remember, judicial review, determining whether laws of Congress or actions of the executive are constitutional. And so that's essential for them to have that function. If the Constitution will mean anything, then laws that don't go with the Constitution must be struck down. Remember, one of the required Supreme Court cases, Marbury v. Madison, is the one that established that power officially. It wasn't explicitly written in the Constitution. It was understood because of arguments like Federal 78, but Marbury Madison in 1803 made judicial review official. So remember, the court decides based on the rule of four. If 4 of the 9 Supreme Court judges agree to grant cert, then they will. We need to see whether the person has standing. Are they the one that's actually harmed? Can they demonstrate actual harm? Is this something new? Is there some sort of conflict in law that needs decided? But the biggest thing is the courts are going to use that principle of stare decisis. Let the decision stand. The prior precedents, the prior decisions from old cases that are similar will be what guides the decision in this case. And we did plenty of practice with that this year. And so the courts aren't going to overturn precedent very often. I mean, even if you see somewhat different philosophical approaches, if an issue is clearly settled in law, you don't often see courts vote to overturn those. I mean, that's what makes landmark decisions so landmark. They go against generations of prior precedent. And you can see that sometimes in the ideological makeup of the court. The Rehnquist court was more conservative leaning than had been the case in the 60s and 70s. And so they put a stop to the expansion of the Commerce Clause in Lopez. But again, those are kind of once in a generation type of cases. Here are some checks by each of the other two branches over the courts. I think for the most part, they're pretty self-explanatory. Remember things like laws that could modify court decisions, the Religious Freedom and Restoration Act, RFRA. We looked at that within the context of the Employment Division v. Smith case, the Native Americans using peyote. Remember, the courts wanted them to use that older test that required strict scrutiny, really, really difficult degree of proof for the government to restrict religious beliefs. And the courts can also, Congress can also pass constitutional amendments that could cancel out a Supreme Court decision. We've seen that before with the 11th Amendment, which said that the federal courts will not hear state versus state issues in response to the case you see there. And then in the 26th Amendment, that was in response to Mitchell v. Oregon, where the Congress had passed a law that said 18-year-olds can vote under the authority of protecting civil rights. The court said no way. So they passed the 26th Amendment to allow 18-year-olds to vote. Remember the big one over here that we think is kind of weird? The AP folks love the idea that the president can refuse to enforce Supreme Court decisions. But of course, his biggest power over the courts is appointment. And then the judicial philosophies are, again, pretty self-explanatory. Make sure you know the difference between those two. Make sure you could look at a case and argue whether you think the opinion is either activism or restraint. I mean, those are some core AP kind of ideas. If you have specific questions over this stuff, let me